My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and for 37 years, I believed family meant staying when everyone else walked away. That belief died on Christmas night. 3 weeks before Christmas, I buried my only son, Daniel Whitmore, beneath a sky so gray it looked like the world had forgotten how to breathe. Daniel was 46. A heart attack took him in the middle of a Tuesday morning, right inside the law office where he worked. 1 minute, he was helping a client sign estate documents. The next, he was gone. His wife, Vanessa, stood beside me at the funeral in a black designer coat, holding a white handkerchief to her face. Everyone said she looked devastated. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. Because after Daniel died, she was all I had left. Daniel and Vanessa had lived in the house on Maple Crest Lane, the same house my late husband, Thomas, and I had bought decades earlier. It was where Daniel learned to ride his bike. It was where he brought Vanessa home for the first time. It was where I still had a bedroom, a sewing basket by the window, and a framed photo of Daniel at age 7 holding a crooked Christmas ornament. So when Vanessa invited me to Christmas dinner, I thought she was trying to keep the family together. I was wrong. That evening, I arrived with a pumpkin pie, Daniel's favorite cranberry stuffing, and a small silver ornament engraved with his name. I had wrapped it in blue tissue paper because blue had been his favorite color since childhood. The house was glowing. Music played softly. Candles flickered on the dining table. Vanessa's parents were there. Her brother and his wife were there. Even 2 of her friends from the country club were sitting in my son's living room, drinking wine from crystal glasses I had bought for Daniel and Vanessa's wedding. But the moment I walked in, the warmth vanished. Vanessa looked at my pie like I had brought a box of garbage. "Oh," she said. "You came." I forced a smile. "You invited me, sweetheart." Her lips tightened. "Yes. Well, I thought you might understand this was more of an intimate family dinner." The room went quiet. I looked around at the strangers sitting in my son's home. "I am family," I said softly. Vanessa's mother gave a small laugh into her wine glass. Vanessa stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to seem polite, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Eleanor, Daniel is gone, and we all need to start accepting new realities." I felt my fingers tighten around the pie dish. "I know Daniel is gone," I said. I held his hand in the hospital. Her eyes hardened. "Then maybe you should stop acting like this house still revolves around you." No one spoke. My chest burned, but I stayed calm. I had survived a husband's cancer, a son's grief, and nights so lonely the silence felt alive. I could survive a cruel sentence. But Vanessa was not finished. She turned toward the dining room and said, "Everyone, please sit. Dinner is getting cold." Then she looked back at me. "Eleanor, there isn't a place set for you." That was the first crack. But the real cruelty came after dessert. I sat in the corner of the living room while everyone else ate dinner around the table. Vanessa did not ask me to join them. She did not bring me a plate. She did not even pretend to forget. She wanted me to see every empty inch where I should have belonged. I could hear them laughing from the dining room. Vanessa's brother joked about turning Daniel's old study into a wine room. Her mother suggested Vanessa should refresh the house, now that the past had been cleared out. Those words struck me harder than I expected. The past. That was what they called my son. Not Daniel. Not husband. Not father. Not family. The past. After dinner, Vanessa finally walked into the living room. She had a glass of red wine in one hand and Daniel's wedding ring on a chain around her neck. For 1 second, seeing that ring softened me. Then she spoke. "We need to discuss your living situation." "My living situation?" I asked. "Yes. Your room upstairs." I looked toward the staircase. My room had been there for years. After my hip surgery, Daniel insisted I stay with them during winters so he could check on me. I paid for groceries. I helped with laundry. I never interfered. Vanessa set her glass down. "I've been generous, Eleanor. But now Daniel is gone, and I can't keep caring for everyone else's emotional needs." I stared at her. "You think I'm an emotional need?" "I think you're a burden." The word landed in the room like shattered glass. A burden. I was 71 years old. My son had just died. I had brought food to Christmas dinner because I could not bear to arrive empty-handed. And this woman, who wore the pearls I gave her on her wedding day, looked me in the eye and called me a burden. Vanessa's father stepped into the doorway, pretending concern. "Maybe it's time for assisted living," he said. "There are good places for women your age." Women your age. I felt Daniel's presence then. Not like a ghost. Like memory. Like the boy who once stood between me and a barking dog when he was only 9 years old, trembling but brave. I lifted my chin. This is still my home too. Vanessa laughed. No, Eleanor. This was Daniel's home. And now it's mine. I did not answer, because I knew something she did not. The house on Maple Crest Lane was not Daniel's. It had never been Daniel's. Years earlier, after Thomas died, Daniel asked me to let him and Vanessa live there while they saved money. I agreed. Later, when Daniel became an attorney, he helped restructure the property into a family trust for tax and estate reasons. But the controlling interest remained mine. Daniel knew. Vanessa did not. And Daniel, cautious as always, had put something else in writing. Something that would matter very soon. Vanessa folded her arms. I want you out by New Year's. I swallowed slowly. Vanessa, this is Christmas night. Then consider it my final gift to you, she said. A chance to leave with dignity. But she did not give me until New Year's. She gave me less than an hour. I went upstairs to collect my coat, my medication, and the small overnight bag I kept in the closet. My hands shook as I folded my sweater. Not from fear, from restraint. There are moments when anger becomes so large it turns quiet. That was what happened to me. I did not scream. I did not beg. I did not remind Vanessa that I had paid the down payment on her first car, watched over her during Daniel's late nights, and sat beside her through 2 miscarriages when her own mother was too busy to visit. I simply packed. At the bottom of my drawer was Daniel's old Christmas card from the year before. He had written only one line inside. Mom, whatever happens, this house will always protect you. At the time, I thought he meant love. Now, I wondered if he meant law. I placed the card in my purse. When I came downstairs, Vanessa was waiting by the front door. She had my winter coat draped over one arm and my old leather handbag in the other. You packed quickly, she said. I've learned not to stay where I'm unwanted. Her eyes flickered, but only for a second. Outside, snow was falling. Not heavily, but enough to cover the porch steps in a thin white sheet. Vanessa opened the door. You can stay at a motel tonight, she said. I'm sure Daniel left you something. I looked past her into the living room. The Christmas tree was still glowing. The ornament I had brought for Daniel sat unopened on the side table. May I at least take the ornament? I asked. Vanessa glanced at it. No, it belongs here. I felt something inside me go still. The silver ornament had my son's name on it. I had bought it. I had wrapped it. And she would not even let me take that. I stepped onto the porch. The door closed behind me. Then I heard it. Click. The lock. Then another. Click. The deadbolt. I turned around slowly and stared at the front door of the house where I had once carried Daniel home from the hospital. The house where Thomas and I had danced barefoot in the kitchen after our mortgage was approved. The house where I had measured Daniel's height on the pantry door every birthday until he turned 18. Now I was standing outside it on Christmas night, locked out by the woman my son had loved. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again. Through the frosted glass, I saw Vanessa's silhouette pause. Then she turned away. My phone had 6% battery. My fingers were stiff from cold. I called the only person I could think of. Margaret Hale, Daniel's senior law partner. Margaret answered on the second ring. Eleanor. I tried to speak, but my voice broke. Vanessa locked me out. There was silence. Then Margaret's voice changed. Where are you? On the porch. In this weather? Yes. Do not move, she said. I'm coming. 20 minutes later, Margaret arrived in a black SUV. She stepped out in a wool coat, her silver hair pinned neatly back, her expression colder than the snow. She looked at the locked door, then at me. Then she said something I never forgot. Daniel was afraid she would do this. Margaret took me to her home that night. She did not ask too many questions. She gave me dry socks, hot tea, and the guest bedroom with a blue quilt folded at the foot of the bed. I remember sitting on the edge of that bed, still wearing my coat, unable to understand how quickly a person could become homeless in a house filled with their own memories. At midnight, Margaret knocked softly. Eleanor, she said, there's something Daniel asked me to give you, but only if Vanessa forced you out. My breath caught. She entered carrying a cream-colored envelope. My name was written across the front in Daniel's handwriting. Mom. Just that. Mom. I touched the envelope before opening it. My son's handwriting was steady, familiar, alive in a way he no longer was. Inside were 3 things. A letter, a copy of the trust agreement, and a sealed legal instruction labeled, Emergency Occupancy Protection Clause. I looked up. What is this? Margaret sat across from me. Daniel came to me 6 months ago. He was worried about Vanessa. Worried how? Margaret hesitated. He believed she was pressuring him to amend his will. She wanted full control of the house, the investment accounts, and his life insurance. But Daniel knew the house was never truly his to give. I stared down at the papers. He never told me. He didn't want to upset you. That sounded like Daniel. Always carrying pain quietly so other people would not have to feel it. I unfolded the letter. Mom, if you are reading this, then something I feared has happened. I hope I was wrong. I hope Vanessa treated you with kindness. But if she didn't, I need you to remember this clearly. You are not dependent on her. You are not a guest. You are not powerless. The house is protected under the Whitmore Family Trust. You are the controlling trustee. Vanessa has no legal right to remove you from the property. I should have told you sooner. I thought I had time. I am sorry. If I'm gone, Margaret will help you. Do not argue with Vanessa alone. Let the law speak. I love you. Daniel, by the time I finished reading, tears had blurred the page. Not because of the house. Because Daniel had known. He had seen what Vanessa was becoming. He had prepared for it. Even while alive, he had been trying to protect me from the day I might be left alone. Margaret slid another document toward me. There's more. I looked at the title. Last Will and Testament of Daniel Thomas Whitmore. My hands froze. The will reading is scheduled for December 28th, Margaret said. Vanessa believes she will inherit everything. Will she? Margaret's mouth tightened. She will inherit less than she thinks. I looked at her. And the house. Margaret's eyes sharpened. The house remains under the trust. And because Vanessa unlawfully locked out the controlling trustee, she may have triggered Daniel's penalty clause. Penalty clause? Margaret nodded. Daniel was very clear. If Vanessa attempted to remove you, isolate you, or interfere with your occupancy rights after his death, certain benefits would be revoked. I sat very still. For the first time since Daniel died, I felt something other than grief. Not joy, not revenge. A quiet return of balance. Margaret leaned forward. Eleanor, when that lawyer speaks at the will reading, Vanessa is going to understand exactly what she has done. The next morning, Vanessa called me 7 times. I did not answer. Then the text messages began. Where are you? You embarrassed me last night. People are asking questions. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Not one message asked if I was safe. Not one asked where I slept. Not one apologized. By noon, she changed tactics. Eleanor, I know grief is making you emotional. Come by later and we can discuss boundaries like adults. Boundaries. That word made me laugh once, bitterly. She locked a grieving mother out on Christmas night and called it boundaries. Margaret advised me not to respond. She filed a formal notice that same day, informing Vanessa that I was represented by counsel and that the property was under active trust review. Vanessa ignored it. Instead, she began performing. On social media, she posted a photo of herself beside Daniel's Christmas tree with the caption, "First Christmas without my soulmate." Trying to be strong. People flooded the comments with sympathy. Poor Vanessa. Beautiful tribute. Daniel would be proud. I stared at the post from Margaret's kitchen table and wondered how many people would still pity her if they knew she had left Daniel's mother outside in the snow. But Margaret only said, "Let her perform. It will help us." How? Because she is establishing a public image. When the truth comes out, the contrast will matter. Over the next 2 days, I learned more than I wanted to know. Daniel had not died, leaving chaos behind. He had been careful, very careful. The house on Maple Crest Lane was owned by the Whitmore Family Trust, established by Thomas and me. Daniel and Vanessa had occupancy permission, but not ownership. Daniel's personal assets were divided into 3 categories: a charitable fund for cardiac research, a protected education account for his goddaughter, and conditional support for Vanessa. Conditional. That was the word Vanessa had not expected. Daniel had written that Vanessa would receive financial support only if she honored 3 obligations. She had to preserve my right to live in the home. She had to return personal family items belonging to me. And she had to cooperate with the trust administration. If she violated those conditions, her benefits would be reduced and redirected. Vanessa had violated all 3 within 24 hours of Christmas dinner. On December 27th, the day before the will reading, Margaret drove me past Maple Crest Lane. I did not ask her to stop. I only wanted to see the house once before everything changed. There were workers outside. 2 men carrying boxes. A third removing furniture. My heart jumped. She's clearing the house, I whispered. Margaret pulled over. Through the window, I saw Daniel's leather reading chair being carried toward a moving truck. Thomas's old grandfather clock stood wrapped in plastic near the porch. My grandfather clock. The one Thomas had restored by hand. Margaret's expression hardened. Stay in the car. She stepped out and spoke to the workers. Within minutes, they stopped moving. One of them handed her a clipboard. She photographed it, then returned to the SUV. What happened? I asked. She hired them to remove old family junk before selling the house. Selling the house. My vision blurred. She can't sell it, I said. No, Margaret replied. She can't. Then she looked at me with calm certainty. But tomorrow, she'll find that out in front of everyone. The will reading took place at Hale and Morrison LLP, the law firm where Daniel had worked for nearly 18 years. I wore a navy dress Daniel had once said made me look like a judge who secretly baked cookies. The memory nearly broke me that morning, but I wore it anyway. Margaret walked beside me through the lobby. Heads turned. Some people knew me. Some had attended Daniel's funeral. A young paralegal placed her hand over her heart when she saw me. Mrs. Whitmore, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I nodded because I could not trust my voice. The conference room was already half full. Vanessa sat at the head of the table. Not beside it. At the head. She wore black silk, pearls, and an expression of controlled sorrow. Her mother sat to her right. Her father to her left. Her brother leaned back in his chair like he was waiting for a business deal to close. When Vanessa saw me, her face tightened. What is she doing here? She asked. Margaret answered before I could. Mrs. Whitmore is a named party in the estate proceedings. Vanessa gave a small, sharp laugh. She's Daniel's mother. Of course she can listen. But let's not pretend she has authority here. Margaret did not respond. That silence unnerved Vanessa more than any argument would have. A few minutes later, Charles Brennan, Daniel's estate attorney, entered the room. He was an older man with gentle eyes and a voice that carried without effort. He placed a folder on the table. Thank you all for coming. We are here to review the final testamentary documents of Daniel Thomas Whitmore. Vanessa dabbed at her eyes. I watched her hand. No tears. Touched the handkerchief. Charles began with formal language. Dates. Witnesses. Signatures. Legal declarations. Then he spoke of Daniel's charitable gift. Vanessa shifted. Then the goddaughter's education account. Vanessa's brother frowned. Then Charles turned a page. To my wife, Vanessa Claire Whitmore, I leave conditional support from my personal estate, subject to the conduct provisions outlined in Section 7. Vanessa straightened. Conditional, she said. Charles looked over his glasses. Yes. Her mother whispered. What does that mean? Charles continued. Section 7 states that Vanessa Claire Whitmore shall retain financial support only if she does not remove, evict, intimidate, isolate, or otherwise interfere with my mother Eleanor Whitmore's lawful residence or personal property rights. The room went silent. Vanessa stopped breathing. Charles turned another page. In the event that Vanessa Claire Whitmore violates these terms, her conditional support shall be reduced substantially, and any disputed property shall revert to the authority of the Whitmore Family Trust. Vanessa's face drained of color. Then Charles looked directly at her. Mrs. Whitmore, were you aware that Eleanor Whitmore was locked out of the Maple Crest property on Christmas night? Nobody moved. Vanessa's lips parted. Her father sat forward. Now, wait a minute. Charles raised one hand. I am not asking you, sir. Vanessa stared at him. The room waited. And then Charles said the sentence that froze her completely. Because Daniel anticipated this exact possibility, he signed an enforcement clause before his death. Vanessa's hand fell from her necklace. What enforcement clause? She whispered. Charles opened a second folder. The clause that removes your authority over the house, suspends your conditional inheritance, and confirms Eleanor Whitmore as controlling trustee. He turned toward me. Mrs. Whitmore, legally, the house belongs under your control. Vanessa went white. For the first time since Christmas night, she had nothing to say. Vanessa stared at Charles Brennan as though he had spoken in another language. That's impossible, she said. Charles remained calm. It is not. Daniel told me this was our house. It was your marital residence, Charles said. That is not the same as ownership. Vanessa looked at Margaret, then at me, then back at Charles. No, Daniel would never do this to me. I heard something in her voice then. Not grief. Not heartbreak. Entitlement. Charles folded his hands. Daniel did not do this to you. Daniel made provisions to protect his mother's rights and family property. Vanessa's mother snapped. This is cruel. She just lost her husband. I finally spoke. So did I. The room went still. I had not raised my voice. I did not need to. I lost my son, I said. And on Christmas night, your daughter locked me out of the house where I raised him. Vanessa's mother looked away. Vanessa's brother muttered, This is ridiculous. Margaret slid photographs across the table. The moving truck. The boxes. The wrapped grandfather clock. The signed work order authorizing removal of obsolete family items. Charles reviewed them, then looked at Vanessa. Mrs. Whitmore, did you hire movers to clear the property before the estate and trust review was complete? Vanessa's jaw tightened. I was cleaning. Margaret said. You listed the house with a private broker. That landed like thunder. Vanessa's father turned toward her. You what? Vanessa shot him a warning look. Charles opened another document. We have received confirmation that a preliminary listing agreement was submitted on December 26th. December 26th. The day after she locked me out. The day after Christmas. The day after she called me a burden. I looked down at my hands. They were steady now. Vanessa leaned forward. I was Daniel's wife. I have rights. Yes, Charles said. You do. But you do not have rights to sell trust property, remove trust-controlled contents, or deny access to the controlling trustee. The words controlling trustee seemed to physically hurt her. She turned to me then. For one moment, I thought she might apologize. Instead, she said, You planned this. A small sound escaped me. Not quite a laugh. Vanessa, my son died. You hated that he chose me. I welcomed you into my family. You always judged me. I protected you when Daniel worked late. I sat with you when you cried. I never wanted your marriage to fail. Her eyes sharpened. But you wanted his money. That was when something inside me finally broke open. Not rage. Truth. Daniel had no money when he married you, I said. He had student loans, a used car, and a mother who helped pay the heating bill that first winter. The house you posed in, the silver you served dinner with, the dining table where you humiliated me. All of that came from the life Thomas and I built before you ever arrived. Vanessa's mouth closed. Charles spoke again. Effective immediately, Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore has the authority to regain access to Maple Crest Lane. Mrs. Vanessa Whitmore must vacate or negotiate temporary occupancy under trust supervision. Vanessa's face hardened. You can't throw me out. I looked at her. No, I said quietly. But you threw me out first. We returned to Maple Crest Lane that afternoon. Not alone. Margaret came with me. Charles sent a junior attorney. A sheriff's deputy met us at the curb because Margaret had requested a civil standby to prevent conflict. Vanessa arrived 10 minutes later in her black SUV, driving too fast up the snowy street. She got out without a coat. This is harassment, she shouted. The deputy remained calm. Ma'am, we're here to keep the peace while lawful access is restored. Lawful access? Vanessa pointed at me. She has been poisoning everyone against me. I did not answer. The locksmith changed the locks while Vanessa stood in the driveway, shaking with anger. I watched the front door open, and for a moment, I could not step inside. The house smelled different. Too much perfume. Too much candle smoke. Too little Daniel. Boxes lined the hallway. My framed photographs were stacked face down near the stairs. The pantry door where Daniel's height marks had been recorded was covered by a white sheet. I walked to it slowly and pulled the sheet away. The pencil marks were still there. Daniel, age 8. Daniel, age 10. Daniel, age 13. Daniel, age 16. At the top, in Daniel's adult handwriting, was one more mark. Mom, age timeless. He had written it on my 70th birthday as a joke. I touched the words and finally cried. Behind me, Vanessa said nothing. Maybe even she understood that some things could not be replaced by legal documents. Then I saw the empty space by the living room wall. The clock, I said. Margaret turned. Vanessa looked away. The grandfather clock was gone. So is the silver, the junior attorney said, checking the inventory list. And several framed documents. Vanessa crossed her arms. They were being stored. Where? Margaret asked. Vanessa did not answer. The deputy took notes. For the next 2 hours, we walked room by room, recording what had been moved, damaged, or removed. Vanessa grew quieter with every page of the inventory. Because the evidence was no longer emotional. It was documented. That evening, after everyone left, Margaret asked if I wanted to stay somewhere else. I looked around the house. The tree still stood in the living room. Daniel's unopened ornament still sat on the side table. I picked it up, unwrapped it, and hung it on the highest branch. Daniel Thomas Whitmore. Beloved son. The lights reflected in the silver. No, I said. I'm staying. Margaret touched my shoulder. Are you sure? I nodded. This house protected me because Daniel made sure it would. Now I need to protect what he left behind. That night, I slept in my old room. For the first time since Daniel died, I did not dream of the hospital. I dreamed of him as a little boy, running through the hallway with snow on his boots, laughing because he thought Christmas could last forever. Vanessa did not leave quietly. People like Vanessa rarely do. 2 days after the will reading, she began calling relatives, neighbors, and Daniel's former colleagues. Her story changed depending on who was listening. To some, I was a confused elderly woman being manipulated by lawyers. To others, I was a greedy mother trying to steal from a grieving widow. On Facebook, she posted, "Grief reveals people's true colors. Some mothers cannot let their sons go, even after death." This time, the comments were not as kind. One neighbor wrote, "Is this about Eleanor?" Another wrote, "I saw movers at the house before the estate was settled. That seemed strange." Vanessa deleted the post within an hour. But screenshots live longer than lies. Margaret warned me Vanessa might attempt a legal challenge. She did. Her attorney sent a letter claiming Daniel had been emotionally pressured into signing the enforcement clause. Charles responded with something Vanessa had not expected. Video. 6 months before Daniel died, he had recorded a formal statement in Margaret's office. He sat in a navy suit, looking tired but clear-eyed. I watched the video only once. It nearly broke me. Daniel looked into the camera and said, "My mother, Eleanor Whitmore, is to remain protected in the Maple Crest property. This is not negotiable. I have observed concerning behavior from my wife regarding family assets, and I am including this statement to prevent future misrepresentation." He paused. Then he added, "If Vanessa treats my mother with kindness, she will be cared for. If she does not, I want the law to reflect my intentions." I pressed my hand over my mouth. Daniel had not been suspicious without reason. He had been afraid. Afraid enough to record himself. Afraid enough to predict the exact cruelty that followed his death. Vanessa's attorney withdrew several claims after seeing the video. But Vanessa still had one final weapon. She came to the house on New Year's Eve. It was nearly dark. Snow lined the walkway. I was in the kitchen making tea when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw her standing alone. No pearls. No black silk. No performance. Just Vanessa, pale and furious. I opened the door, but left the chain on. "What do you want?" She looked past me into the house. "I need to get my things. Margaret arranged supervised pickup for tomorrow. I'm not waiting." "You'll have to." Her face twisted. "You think you won." I said nothing. "You think Daniel chose you over me." I felt tired suddenly. Tired of fighting someone who could not understand love unless it came with ownership papers. "No, Vanessa," I said. "Daniel chose decency. You chose everything else." Her eyes filled with tears then, but they were angry tears. "I was his wife." "Yes," I said, "and I wanted you to remain part of this family." For 1 second, her face changed. Maybe regret. Maybe calculation. Then she whispered, "You ruined my life." I looked at her through the narrow opening. "No, you tried to ruin mine when you thought I had nothing left." Then I closed the door. This time, I was the one on the inside. The legal reversal was complete by January 5th. The legal reversal was no longer a threat. It was reality. Vanessa's conditional inheritance was reduced according to Daniel's will. A portion that would have gone to her was redirected to the cardiac research fund Daniel had named in honor of his father. Another portion was placed into a protected account to maintain Maple Crest Lane and cover my living expenses. The court did not need a dramatic trial. The documents were clear. The trust was valid. The enforcement clause was valid. The evidence of Vanessa's conduct was overwhelming. She had locked me out. She had attempted to sell trust property. She had removed personal items. She had ignored formal notice. Every action she took because she thought she held power became the reason she lost it. That is the thing about arrogance. It moves quickly, but the law remembers slowly and completely. The grandfather clock was recovered from a storage facility 2 towns over. The The silver was found in sealed boxes marked estate sale. Daniel's childhood photographs were returned, though one frame had cracked. I kept the crack. I did not repair it. Some damage should remain visible. Not because we worship pain, because we remember what truth survived. Vanessa was allowed to collect her personal belongings under supervision. She arrived with her father and a moving company. She did not look at me when she entered. I sat in the dining room while Margaret reviewed the inventory. The same dining room where Vanessa had refused to set a place for me on Christmas night. Now the table was bare except for Daniel's blue ornament, resting in a small velvet box. Vanessa paused when she saw it. "That was mine," she said. I looked up. No, it was Daniel's. I was his wife. And I was his mother. The words were not cruel. They were simply true. She swallowed. For the first time, she looked smaller. Not humble. Not healed. Just smaller without the house around her like armor. As the movers carried out her boxes, she stopped near the doorway. "Did he really make that video?" she asked. "Yes." Her voice dropped. What else did he say? I could have hurt her then. I could have told her that Daniel had feared her greed, that he had worried about her temper, that he had built legal walls because love had stopped feeling safe. But revenge has limits when grief is in the room. So I said only this. He said he hoped he was wrong. Vanessa's face tightened. Then she walked out. The door closed behind her. No click of cruelty. No deadbolt of humiliation. Just the end of a chapter Daniel had tried to prevent. And the beginning of one I never expected to live. Emotional revenge. People think revenge is watching someone suffer. It is not. At least, not the kind that lasts. The deepest revenge is surviving with your dignity intact. By late January, Maple Crest Lane felt like home again. Not the same home. It would never be the same without Daniel's voice calling from the kitchen or Thomas's old radio playing in the garage. But it was mine again. I rehung the family photographs. I polished the grandfather clock. I placed Daniel's law school diploma back on the wall of his study. But I did not turn the study into a shrine. Daniel would have hated that. Instead, I made it useful. With Margaret's help, I created the Daniel Whitmore Legal Aid Fund, a small community program for elderly people facing housing abuse, financial coercion, or family exploitation. The first client was a woman named Ruth, 82, whose nephew had convinced her to sign documents she did not understand. The second was a retired teacher whose daughter had emptied her savings account. The third was a widower whose stepchildren tried to force him out of his own home after his wife died. Every time someone sat across from me and whispered, I didn't know what to do. I heard myself on Christmas night. Locked out. Freezing. Ashamed for needing help. And every time, I answered the way Margaret answered me. You are not powerless. In February, the local paper ran a small article about the fund. They used a photo of me standing on the porch of Maple Crest Lane, wearing Daniel's blue scarf. Vanessa must have seen it, because 3 days later, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was one sentence. I didn't know he had protected you that much. No apology. No accountability. Just surprise. I placed the letter in a drawer and did not answer. Some people do not regret hurting you. They regret miscalculating your protection. That was Vanessa, but I no longer needed her apology to feel free. On Daniel's birthday in March, I hosted dinner at the house. Margaret came. Charles came. Daniel's goddaughter came with flowers. A few neighbors came too, including the woman who had seen the moving truck and later told the truth when asked. I cooked Daniel's favorite cranberry stuffing even though Christmas had passed months earlier. At the table, I set one empty chair. Not for Vanessa. For Daniel. Before dinner, I placed his blue ornament in the center of the table. The silver caught the candlelight. I looked around at the people who had stood beside truth when it mattered. Then I said, my son thought this house would protect me. Margaret smiled gently. I touched the ornament. But I think he also wanted me to remember that protection is not only walls and documents. Sometimes it is people. Sometimes it is courage. Sometimes it is finally refusing to leave yourself outside in the cold. No one spoke for a moment. Then Charles raised his glass. To Daniel. We all answered. To Daniel. And for the first time, his name did not break me. It held me together. The house that finally let me grieve spring came slowly that year. The snow melted from the porch steps. The maple tree in the front yard began to bud. Sunlight returned to the kitchen in long golden strips, touching the floor where Daniel used to sit as a child, building towers out of cereal boxes while I made breakfast. Grief did not leave. That is not how grief works. It stayed, but it changed shape. At first, it had been a locked door, then a hospital room, then a courtroom folder, then a blue ornament hanging from a Christmas tree after everyone else had gone. But by spring, grief became something quieter. A chair by the window. A photograph dusted carefully. A story I could tell without losing my breath. One morning, I found Daniel's old toolbox in the garage. Inside was a folded note taped to the lid. "Mom, if the pantry marks ever fade, repaint around them. Never over them." I laughed and cried at the same time. That was Daniel. Practical even from beyond the grave. So I did exactly what he asked. I hired a painter to refresh the kitchen, but the pantry door remained untouched. Every pencil line stayed. Every age. Every mark. Every year. On the top, I added one new line in my own handwriting. Daniel, forever home. Not because he was trapped there. Because love, when it is real, does not disappear from the rooms where it once lived. Months later, I saw Vanessa one final time. It was at the courthouse, after a routine trust matter. She was standing near the entrance, dressed plainly, holding a folder. She looked thinner, older, less polished. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she approached. "I'm moving to Arizona," she said. I nodded. "I hope you find peace there." She looked surprised by that. Maybe she expected hatred. Maybe she wanted it. Hatred would have made me easier to dismiss. Instead, I gave her the one thing she had never given me. A clean ending. She looked down. "I was angry," she said. "I know. I thought if I controlled the house, I could control what came after Daniel." I studied her face. "And did you?" Her eyes filled. No, for the first time, I believed her tears were real. But real tears do not erase real harm. So I said, "Vanessa, I loved my son enough to let him build a life with you. But I also love myself enough not to let you destroy what he left for me." She nodded once. Then she walked away. I never saw her again. That summer, the Daniel Whitmore Legal Aid Fund helped its 10th client return safely to her home after her grandson tried to force her out. When the woman hugged me, she whispered, "I thought nobody would believe me." I held her gently. "I believe you." And I did, because I had stood on a porch on Christmas night with my own key useless in my hand. I had heard the lock turn. I had felt the cold. But I had also heard the lawyer speak. I had watched the truth rise from paper, ink, signatures, and the love of a son who had prepared protection even when he could no longer stand beside me. People later asked if I was happy Vanessa lost the house. The answer is no. I was not happy. I was free. There is a difference. Happiness is loud. Freedom is quiet. Freedom is sleeping through the night in the room you were told you no longer deserved. Freedom is hanging your son's ornament where no one can take it. Freedom is opening your own front door without fear. On the next Christmas, I set the table for 5 guests, not because I needed a crowd, but because I finally understood family was not always who married in, inherited, or claimed a name. Family was who showed up when the door was locked. Before dinner, I stood by the tree and touched Daniel's blue ornament. "Your house protected me," I whispered. Then the grandfather clock began to chime. 1, 2, 3. Each note moved through the hallway like a heartbeat. And for the first time since my son died, Maple Crest Lane did not feel like the place where I had lost everything. It felt like the place where Daniel had left one final gift. Not money, not revenge, not even the house. He left me proof that I was still worth protecting. And that was how I finally came home.